"You missed a spot," the security guard said, loud enough for the entire lobby to hear, and the laughter that followed didn't echo. It lingered, clinging to the polished marble like something that didn't belong there. Amara Johnson didn't look up right away. Her hand stayed steady on the mop handle, fingers wrapped tight around the worn blue grip as she guided the damp fibers across the floor in slow, even strokes. The scent of industrial cleaner hung faintly in the air, sharp and sterile, mixing with the low hum of the building's climate system. 30 feet above her, a chandelier of cut glass scattered light in quiet fragments, each reflection shifting as people moved, as shoes clicked, as whispers turned into chuckles. "Hey, I'm talking to you," the guard added, nudging the edge of her yellow caution sign with the toe of his boot just enough to tilt it sideways. A ripple of amusement passed between two men standing near the reception desk, their suits crisp, their badges catching the light. Amara adjusted the sign without a word. Her name tag, white letters on black plastic, read Amara in clean, simple font, slightly scratched at the corner. She had been on her feet for nearly 6 hours, the late shift stretching long past midnight into the kind of quiet that made every sound feel amplified, every glance heavier than it should be. She moved to the next section of the floor, the wheels of her cart squeaking softly, a rhythm she had long ago learned to ignore. Somewhere behind her, the guard let out a short laugh, lower this time, as if the moment had already passed for him. But for Amara, moments like that didn't pass. They settled, not loudly, not visibly, just enough to be remembered. The glass doors at the far end of the lobby slid open with a soft hydraulic whisper, and a rush of cooler air slipped inside, carrying with it the distant scent of rain against concrete. Conversations paused, just slightly. Heads turned, almost in unison, the way they did when someone important entered a room without needing to announce it. Amara noticed the shift before she saw the man. She felt it in the stillness, in the way footsteps adjusted, in how the receptionist straightened behind her desk. Richard Caldwell stepped inside without hurry, his coat draped neatly over one arm, his presence quiet but absolute. The kind of presence that didn't ask for attention, it commanded it by default. His shoes made a muted sound against the marble, precise, measured, each step aligned with intention. He didn't look at the guard. He didn't look at the men by the desk. His gaze moved once across the lobby, taking everything in the way someone used to control always did. Amara lowered her eyes again, guiding the mop along the edge of a reflection that wasn't hers. But as she turned, her cart brushed lightly against a stack of documents left on a nearby side table, just enough to shift the top page. It slid, slowly, almost silently, until it rested at an angle. Her movement stopped. Just for a second. Her eyes flicked down. Lines of text. Numbers. A clause heading. The kind of language she hadn't read in years, but hadn't forgotten either. Behind her, the guard's voice rose again, casual, dismissive, filling the space like background noise. "Careful, wouldn't want you messing up something important." Another small laugh. But Amara wasn't listening anymore. The words on the page held her there, quiet, still, as the reflection of the chandelier trembled faintly across the ink, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled low, almost too soft to notice. Amara did not touch the page at first. She only looked, her eyes moving once, then again, slower this time, as if the words might shift if she rushed them. The paper rested half off the stack, its corner lifted just enough to catch the cool air drifting through the lobby, fluttering almost imperceptibly. Liability transfer clause. The phrase sat there in clean, confident type, surrounded by language meant to sound harmless, meant to pass unnoticed. Her grip on the mop tightened slightly, the rubber pressing into her palm. She had seen something like this before, not in this building, not in this life, but in another version of it, one that felt distant now, like a room she had once lived in and quietly left behind. "You going to stand there all night?" the guard called out again, his voice cutting through the low hum of the space. Amara blinked once and straightened, guiding the mop forward as if nothing had changed, as if the page had not just pulled her somewhere else entirely. Her cart rolled beside her, metal frame rattling softly with each step, the bucket half full, the water reflecting the chandelier above in broken fragments. She moved past the table, but not too far, just enough to keep the document within her peripheral vision. 10 feet away, then 8, then 5 again as she adjusted her path, slow, deliberate, unnoticed by everyone except herself. Richard Caldwell had stopped near the reception desk now, speaking quietly with someone in a dark suit, his voice too low to carry but firm enough to hold attention. People listened when he spoke, not because he was loud, but because he did not need to be. Amara glanced up once, just for a second, and then back down. The page, the clause, the structure of it. It was subtle, but it was there, hidden behind layers of language that softened its impact, that disguised its direction. If signed as written, responsibility would not stay where it appeared to belong. It would shift, quietly, completely. She exhaled slowly, the kind of breath that steadied something deeper than nerves. Her mother used to say that truth did not always shout. Sometimes it waited for someone willing to notice it. Amara had learned to notice, not because it made life easier, but because ignoring it had never sat right with her. The guard's laughter faded into the background now, replaced by the faint tapping of a keyboard at the front desk, the distant chime of an elevator opening somewhere down the hall, the soft rustle of paper as someone adjusted a folder. Normal sounds, ordinary moments. And yet, beneath it, something felt off, like a note slightly out of tune in an otherwise perfect melody. Amara moved closer again, this time stopping just beside the card, her hand resting lightly on the handle. She did not reach for the document. Not yet. Instead, she watched the reflection of it in the polished floor, the reversed text shimmering faintly beneath her feet. It looked almost the same, but not quite. Just like the clause itself. Her eyes lifted once more, this time toward the man across the lobby, the one everyone else adjusted themselves around. He had not seen the page. Not yet. And for a brief moment, neither had anyone else. The elevator chimed again, a soft tone that barely carried past the polished columns, but it shifted the rhythm of the room just enough. Two executives stepped out, their conversation low and clipped, shoes tapping in clean, even patterns across the marble. One of them carried a leather portfolio tucked under his arm, the edges worn just slightly, the kind of detail that suggested use, not display. Amara watched them only for a second before her attention returned to the table. The document had not moved further, but the air around it felt heavier now, like something waiting to be acknowledged. Richard Caldwell turned slightly, his posture still composed, but his focus narrowing. The conversation at the desk ended with a small nod, and the man he had been speaking with stepped back half a pace, creating space without being told. That was how it worked here. No raised voices. No visible commands. Just quiet adjustments that followed him wherever he stood. Amara shifted her weight, the sole of her shoe pressing gently against the floor as she repositioned the mop. The fibers dragged softly, leaving a faint trail of clean surface behind, but her mind was no longer on the motion. It was on the clause, on the way it curved around responsibility without stating it outright, on how easily it could be missed if someone trusted the structure instead of questioning it. She had learned that lesson the hard way years ago, sitting in a classroom where cases were not just theory but warnings, where one overlooked sentence could change everything. You planning to frame that floor or actually finish it? The guard said again, his tone lighter now, almost amused by his own persistence. A couple of heads turned, not fully, just enough to catch the comment before returning to their own concerns. Amara did not respond, not because she did not hear him, but because answering would anchor her to something that no longer mattered. Her eyes lifted once more, this time following the line of sight that led from the document to the man across the lobby. Caldwell had started walking again, slow, deliberate, his path angling toward the corridor that led to the executive conference rooms. The doors there were darker, heavier, designed to close out everything except what happened inside. The kind of rooms where decisions were made quietly and carried weight far beyond their walls. The document on the table belonged there. It should have already been there. But it was not. It was here, in the open, just long enough for someone like her to see it. That thought settled in her chest, not as urgency, but as clarity. She knew what it meant, and she knew what it could do if it went unnoticed. Her hand shifted on the mop handle, loosening slightly this time, as if the grip itself had been holding her back. Around her, the lobby continued its steady motion, conversations rising and falling, footsteps crossing paths, the world moving forward without pause. But for Amara, the moment had narrowed. Not louder, Not faster, just sharper, focused. The kind of moment that did not ask for permission, only for a decision. 10 seconds passed. Maybe 12. Long enough for Caldwell to reach the midpoint of the lobby. Long enough for the page to remain exactly where it was. Long enough for her to choose whether to keep moving as expected or to step outside the quiet line she had been walking since the beginning of her shift. The guard's voice faded into the distance again, replaced by the soft roll of her cart as she adjusted its position, turning it just slightly toward the table. Not enough to draw attention, just enough to close the distance. The document was now within reach. And this time, she did not look away. Amara's fingers moved before her mind could second-guess them, lifting the edge of the paper just enough to steady it against the airflow, her touch light, careful, as if even the act of holding it carried weight. The texture was smooth, heavier than standard copy stock, the kind used for documents meant to be taken seriously. Her eyes scanned the paragraph again, faster now, tracing the structure, the phrasing, the intentional softness of words designed to conceal more than they revealed. Indemnity reassignment. Conditional liability shift. It was all there, layered beneath language that sounded protective but leaned in the opposite direction if read without assumption. She exhaled slowly, placing the page back exactly where it had been, aligning the corner with precision. No one had noticed. Not the receptionist, still typing with steady rhythm. Not the executives, now moving toward the conference corridor. Not even the guard, whose attention had drifted to his phone, the faint glow lighting his face as he scrolled. But the moment did not release her. It held, quietly, firmly. Richard Caldwell was nearly at the corridor entrance now, one hand adjusting the cuff of his shirt, the motion small, habitual. The doors ahead of him stood slightly ajar, revealing a glimpse of the room beyond, a long table, screens already lit, chairs positioned with exact symmetry. People were waiting inside. Important people. The kind who would read that document quickly, confidently, trusting the layers built around it. Amara's hand rested on the mop handle again, but this time it did not move. Her reflection stared back at her from the floor, distorted slightly by the thin layer of water still drying across the marble. She looked smaller there, quieter, easy to overlook. That was how she had made it through most days. Not invisible, just unexamined. Safe in the spaces where expectations were low. But this was different. The thought did not come as panic. It came as certainty. If that clause went into that room unchanged, it would not stay a small detail. It would become a decision. And decisions like that did not stay contained. They spread. She glanced up again, tracking Caldwell's movement, measuring the distance. 20 feet now. Maybe less. The guard shifted his stance, finally looking up, his gaze flicking briefly in her direction before moving on. Nothing unusual. Nothing worth stopping. Amara stepped forward. Just one step at first, slow enough to blend into the rhythm of her work, the wheels of her cart rolling softly beside her. Then another. The sound of her shoes against the marble barely registered, absorbed by the space itself. She guided the cart to the edge of the table, positioning it as if she were about to clean the surface. Her hand reached for the cloth hanging from the side, the fabric cool and slightly damp. Routine. Familiar. Safe. But her eyes were no longer on the table. They were on the man about to disappear through those doors. The distance closed to 10 feet. 8. 6. The air felt thinner somehow, not physically, but in the way moments do when they narrow down to a single choice. She could stay where she was. Finish the floor. Let the page follow its path. No one would question her. No one would expect more. Or she could step forward. Cross a line that had never been drawn for her to cross. Her grip on the cloth tightened slightly, the fabric bunching between her fingers. Caldwell reached the doorway. One more step and he would be inside. And in that fraction of time, before the door could close, Amara Johnson did something she had not done once since the start of her shift. She spoke. Sir. The word left her mouth softer than she expected, almost swallowed by the space around it. But it was enough. Enough to interrupt the final step. Enough to make Richard Caldwell pause just before crossing the threshold. The door did not close. It remained open, held in that narrow moment between movement and stillness. Conversations nearby faltered, not completely, but just enough to register that something had shifted. Caldwell turned his head slightly, not fully, just enough to locate the source. His eyes settled on her, not with irritation, not yet, but with a quiet assessment that felt heavier than any raised voice. Amara stood where she was, one hand still holding the cloth, the other resting lightly on the cart. She did not move closer. She did not step back. "That clause," she said, her voice steadier now, clearer, carrying just enough to reach him without forcing the room to listen. A few heads turned. The guard straightened almost instantly, his posture snapping into alertness as if a line had been crossed that he suddenly recognized. "Ma'am, you need to," he started, stepping forward, his voice low but urgent, but Caldwell raised a single hand without looking away, and the guard stopped mid-sentence. The silence that followed was not empty. It was charged, stretched thin across the lobby like a held breath. "Which clause?" Caldwell asked, his tone even, controlled, as if this were a routine interruption, as if the answer would either justify the moment or end it. Amara swallowed once, not from fear, but from the weight of being heard. "Page 14, she said. "The liability section. Subsection C." A man inside the conference room shifted, reaching for a copy of the document already laid out on the table. Papers rustled softly, the sound amplified by the stillness around it. The guard took another step closer to Amara, his presence now hovering just behind her shoulder, close enough to intervene if needed. "You are not authorized to be part of this," he said quietly, his voice tight, controlled, but edged with something sharper now, something less amused than before. Amara did not turn to him. Her eyes remained on Caldwell. "It looks like a protection clause," she continued, choosing each word carefully, not rushing, not hesitating. "But it shifts full liability if the agreement fails under specific conditions. It does not share the risk. It transfers it." The man at the table inside flipped through the pages, faster now, his finger tracing lines of text until it stopped. His posture changed, just slightly, his shoulders tightening as he read more closely. Another executive leaned in, their voices low, urgent whispers barely contained. Caldwell's gaze did not move. "And you are certain of that?" he asked. Not dismissive, not convinced. Testing. The guard's hand hovered near Amara's arm, not touching, but ready, his authority reassembling itself as the seconds stretched. "Yes, sir," Amara said. No hesitation this time. No qualifiers. Just the answer. Behind Caldwell, the quiet inside the conference room broke into sharper movement, chairs shifting, a voice rising just enough to signal concern. The document was no longer just paper. It was becoming something else. Something real. The guard stepped in closer now, his voice firmer. "That is enough. You need to step away." But the moment had already moved beyond him. Caldwell took one step back from the doorway, his attention narrowing, not on the room behind him, but on the woman standing in front of him, holding a cleaning cloth, standing on a floor she had been expected to finish without ever being seen. And for the first time since she had spoken, the laughter that had filled the lobby earlier felt like it belonged to a different place entirely. The air did not move, but something inside it shifted, like pressure before a storm that never quite arrives, but makes everything feel sharper, more defined. No one spoke for a moment. Not the guard, whose hand slowly lowered from where it had hovered. Not the executives inside the room, though their quiet urgency continued in restrained whispers. Even the receptionist paused, her fingers resting above the keyboard, unmoving. Amara stood exactly where she had been, her posture unchanged, her breathing steady, the cloth still gathered lightly in her hand. She did not look around. She did not search for reactions. She only waited. Not for approval, not for permission, just for what would come next. Richard Caldwell studied her without expression, but his stillness carried intention. His eyes did not flicker with dismissal. They held, measured, calculating. Not who she was, but what she had said. The difference mattered. Behind him, one of the executives spoke more clearly now, unable to keep the concern fully contained. "He is right. This section." The voice cut itself short, as if aware of the line it had crossed by speaking out of turn. Papers shifted again. A chair scraped lightly against the floor. The sound echoed longer than it should have. Caldwell did not turn toward the voice. He did not need to. He had already heard enough. His attention remained fixed in front of him. On Amara. On the space she occupied that she had not been invited into, but had entered anyway. The guard cleared his throat softly, uncertain now, his authority caught between instruction and hesitation. "Sir, I can have her removed," he said, quieter this time. The confidence from earlier replaced by something less certain, something that waited for direction instead of assuming it. Caldwell's gaze did not shift. No, he said simply. The word was not loud. It did not need to be. It settled into the room with finality. The guard stepped back half a pace, the movement small but noticeable, his posture adjusting to a new understanding he had not anticipated. Amara's grip on the cloth loosened slightly, not in relief, but in recognition that the moment had changed shape. It was no longer about whether she should be there. It was about why she was. Caldwell took a slow step forward, closing the distance between them by a few feet. Not enough to crowd her, just enough to make the space between them intentional. "What is your name?" he asked. The question landed differently than everything before it. Not dismissive, not accusatory, direct. Amara met his gaze fully now, for the first time since she had spoken. "Amara Johnson," she said. Her voice did not waver. Caldwell gave a slight nod, as if placing the name somewhere, not in memory yet, but in consideration. The lobby remained quiet, the earlier laughter now completely absent, replaced by a tension that felt almost respectful. The chandelier light above them continued to shift, reflections moving across the floor, across the polished surfaces, across the edges of the document still resting on the table nearby. Everything looked the same, but it was not. Caldwell's eyes narrowed just slightly, not in suspicion, but in focus. The kind that precedes a decision, or a test. He glanced once toward the conference room, then back at her, the movement brief but deliberate. And in that pause, in that measured silence, the next moment began to form, not as interruption, but as something chosen. Caldwell did not rush the moment. He let it settle, let the silence stretch just enough to reveal what it carried beneath. His gaze remained on Amara, steady, deliberate, as if weighing not only her words, but the way she had chosen to say them. Then, without raising his voice, he asked, "If it transfers liability, where does it land?" The question was simple on the surface, almost casual, but the room felt it differently. Inside the conference room, movement paused again. Someone stopped turning a page. Another leaned forward slightly, listening without appearing to. The guard shifted his stance, uncertain now, his earlier confidence replaced by something quieter, something that did not interrupt. Amara did not answer immediately, not because she did not know, but because she understood what the question required. This was not about repeating what she had seen. It was about proving she understood it. Her eyes moved once, briefly, toward the table where the document still rested, then back to Caldwell. "It consolidates under the signing party," she said, her voice even, controlled. But the wording masks it as conditional exposure. If the trigger events occur, the entire burden moves to the party that appears protected in the earlier sections. A faint shift moved through the room behind him, subtle but unmistakable. Papers rustled again, this time sharper, more focused. One of the executives spoke under his breath, something quick, almost urgent, followed by the sound of a chair adjusting position. Caldwell did not turn. He took one more step forward, closing the distance further, not aggressively, but with intent. "And the trigger?" he asked. Amara's grip on the cloth loosened completely now, the fabric falling naturally against her fingers as her attention centered fully on him. "It is tied to performance benchmarks that are vaguely defined," she replied. "Metrics that can be interpreted after the fact. That makes the clause flexible for one side and binding for the other." The words did not come fast. They came clean, measured, each one placed with care, like steps across a surface that required precision. The guard glanced between them, then toward the conference room, as if trying to understand how the situation had moved beyond him without any clear signal. The receptionist remained still, her screen glowing softly in front of her, forgotten for the moment. Caldwell's expression did not change, but something in his posture did, something small, almost imperceptible, like a shift in balance. He was no longer testing for error. He was listening for depth. "And your recommendation?" he asked. This time, the question carried more weight. Not because it was louder, but because of what it implied. Amara inhaled once, steady and quiet. She did not look at the others. She did not look at the floor. She met his gaze directly. "Clarify the trigger conditions," she said. "Define them in measurable terms. And remove the reassignment language that allows full transfer. If risk is shared, it should remain shared." The silence that followed was different from before. It was no longer uncertain. It was full, complete. Inside the room, someone spoke again, more clearly this time, acknowledging what had just been said without needing to repeat it. Caldwell held her gaze for 1 second longer, then 2. Not searching for weakness, confirming something else entirely. And then, for the first time since the moment began, he looked away from her, turning slightly toward the open conference room door, where the document was no longer just being read, but being reconsidered. The shift inside the conference room was no longer subtle. Chairs moved with purpose now, not hesitation. A man near the far end of the table stood halfway, leaning over the document with a sharpened focus, his finger tracing the exact lines Amara had described. Another executive adjusted his glasses, reading again, slower this time, as if the meaning had changed under his eyes. "This needs to be revised," someone said, not loudly, but clearly enough that the words carried into the lobby. The tone was no longer casual. It was decisive. Caldwell stepped fully away from the doorway, turning his body toward the room, but not entering it yet. His presence alone redirected the energy inside. Conversations lowered immediately, aligning themselves with his silence. He did not need to speak for them to understand that something had shifted in his evaluation of the situation. Behind him, the guard stood still, his earlier posture of control replaced by a quiet uncertainty. His eyes moved from Caldwell to Amara and back again, as if recalibrating a moment he had already misjudged. The distance he had closed earlier now felt inappropriate, and without instruction, he took a small step back, restoring space that should have been there from the beginning. Amara did not acknowledge it. Her attention remained steady, not on the people, not on the reactions, but on the outcome that was unfolding. She had not stepped forward for recognition. She had stepped forward because something was wrong. And now, that wrongness was being seen. Caldwell finally spoke, his voice directed into the room, calm but unmistakably firm. "Hold the signing." The words landed with weight, cutting through the layered conversations and bringing them to an immediate stop. A pen that had been resting on the table was set down. A folder was closed. No one argued. No one questioned. The decision did not invite discussion. It established direction. The document that had nearly passed unnoticed was now at the center of attention, no longer protected by assumption, no longer hidden behind structure. Caldwell stepped inside for a brief moment, just long enough to take the top copy from the table, his movements precise, controlled. He glanced once more at the page, not scanning it, but confirming what had already been revealed. Then he turned back toward the lobby, the paper still in his hand. The executives watched him go, their expressions no longer neutral, but sharpened by the awareness of how close they had come to missing it. As he returned to the threshold, his gaze found Amara again, not searching, not questioning, but acknowledging. The space between them felt different now, not defined by hierarchy, but by something quieter, something earned. The guard shifted again, his hands now resting at his sides, his voice absent, his earlier laughter replaced by silence that seemed heavier than any words he could have offered. Caldwell stopped a few feet in front of Amara, the document held loosely at his side. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The lobby remained still, as if waiting to see what this moment would become. Then, without raising his voice, without changing his tone, Caldwell said, "You did not have to say anything." It was not a reprimand. It was not a question. It was a recognition of the choice she had made. Amara held his gaze, her expression calm, grounded. "No, sir," she replied, but it needed to be said. The words settled into the space between them, simple, direct, carrying no pride, no apology, only truth. Caldwell nodded once, a small movement, but deliberate. Behind him, the room had already begun adjusting, voices quieter now, more careful, the document no longer trusted, but examined. The decision had been made. The outcome had changed. And yet, in the center of it all, the moment remained quiet, almost still, defined not by what had been avoided, but by who had chosen to step forward when no one expected her to. The moment did not end with applause or raised voices or sudden declarations. It settled instead, quietly, like dust returning to the floor after something unseen had shifted the air. Richard Caldwell held the document for a second longer, then passed it back through the doorway without turning, a simple gesture that carried instruction without needing explanation. Inside the conference room, hands reached for it immediately, movements more careful now, more deliberate, as if the paper itself had changed weight. The door remained open, but the tone inside had transformed, no longer confident in assumption, but grounded in attention. In the lobby, the silence softened, not broken, just eased, like tension releasing from a space that had been holding it too tightly. The receptionist resumed typing, slower at first, then returning to rhythm. The faint hum of the building's systems filled the gaps again, steady, constant, familiar. The guard stood where he was, no longer leaning, no longer casual, his posture straight but quieter now, his eyes lowered for a brief moment before lifting again, not toward Amara, but past her, as if unsure where to place his attention. The laughter from earlier did not return. It had nowhere to land anymore. Amara shifted her grip on the cloth, smoothing it once between her fingers before placing it back on the cart. Her hands moved with the same calm precision as before, but something in her stillness had changed. Not larger, not louder, just grounded in a way that did not need acknowledgement to exist. She turned slightly, guiding the cart back into position, the wheels rolling softly across the marble, leaving faint tracks that disappeared as quickly as they formed. The reflection of the chandelier above followed her movement, light breaking and reforming with each step. Caldwell remained where he was for. A moment longer, his gaze no longer fixed, but thoughtful, as if placing the last pieces of something into alignment. Then he spoke again, not to her directly, not to the room, but into the space between, where both could hear. Make sure she is not overlooked again. The words were quiet, almost understated, but they carried further than anything said before. No title was given, no position defined, just a correction, a shift. The guard nodded once, quickly, the movement immediate, almost reflexive, as if the instruction had reached him before he fully processed it. Amara did not respond. She did not turn back. She did not wait. Her work was still there, the floor still needing to be finished, the routine still intact. But the space around her no longer felt the same. It held something different now, something that did not announce itself, but remained. She moved across the lobby, steady, unhurried, the mop gliding over the marble in smooth, even strokes, the faint scent of cleaner rising again, familiar and unchanged. Behind her, the conference room continued, voices measured, decisions reconsidered, the outcome already altered by a moment that had almost been missed. The glass doors at the far end reflected her figure as she passed, the image slightly blurred, softened by distance and light, but unmistakably present. No one stopped her. No one laughed. The building continued to function, as it always had, but somewhere within it, something had shifted, not loudly, not visibly, but permanently. And in the quiet rhythm of her steps, in the steady motion of her work, that shift remained, not as recognition, but as truth, held in the space where it had always belonged, waiting only to be seen.